Dedication. To Christy. Thank you for listening with an open heart, for encouraging me even when I doubted myself, for guiding me with wisdom and patience, and for caring with such compassion. I'm glad we crossed paths, as it has meant more than you may ever know. The Earworm Murders. Chapter 1. Uncle Sam Wants You. The dictionary describes earworm as a catchy song or tune that runs continually through a person's mind. Short for corn earworm. Slang for brainworm, sticky music, stuck song syndrome. Involuntary musical imagery is a catchy or memorable piece of music or saying that continuously occupies a person's mind after it is no longer being played or spoken about. Once upon a time, in a kingdom far, far away, there lived a seemingly normal man by all standards. He believed that the answers life's mysteries lay hidden in plain sight, simply waiting to be discovered by notable men like himself. He was a man of great inquiry, with a deep desire to know and understand. Because of this, he read deep into fortune cookies, ancient riddles, and the backs of cereal boxes. He was a freelance writer for a paranormal news article and a war veteran. His passions lie in the pages of Sun Tzu, Socrates, and the Brothers Grimm. Odie, as he was once called, could often be found at his college's library. But this day was unlike any other before. On this day, he was sought after by a lady in a skirt suit, Lilith, at Caesar's Table, a local family diner. The neon sign outside Caesar's Table sputtered and buzzed like it was on its last breath. The diner was very welcoming, likely due to its staff, structural interior design, and European decor. The Italian restaurant had large, clear windows that let in light and ample space for patrons to walk to and from their booths. It had 2 television sets at separate ends of the establishment where one could watch the day's most interesting stories. The most interesting news of late was that of Dr. Kevorkian. On one of the walls sat a clock depicting a charming, stereotypical Italian chef, and Odie needed it because he had a hard time telling the passing of time. Odie had sat in the corner booth, scarred face half hidden behind a book, nursing a bitter coffee that tasted like burnt pennies. Lilith, having just arrived at Caesar's Table, recognized Odie from afar thanks to his facial scar and urban terrain boots, and approached Odie's booth. Odie was as American as apple pie and baseball. Maybe not baseball. In his eyes, baseball had lost its shine long ago, tainted by the discovery of the game-fixing scandal by the Black Sox in 1919. Odie had been raised to believe that America was the greatest country on earth, that America, being a superpower, had a moral obligation to police the world and stomp out communism wherever it began to sprout. He genuinely used to believe in the American dream, the strong-held belief that through time and hard work, all aspirations like prosperity, success, and upward social mobility were achievable, but only in America's equal opportunity society. Odie came from an honest, hard-working blue-collar family of Mexican descendants. He always had a 5 o'clock shadow, which gave him a rugged, masculine look and added to his somewhat unkempt appearance. He had a large frame, wide shoulders, and a heavier, rounder build, giving him a husky yet strapping appearance. Standing at about 5 feet 9 inches tall, his stature was that of the natural average. However, he appeared an inch taller, if not more, in his urban terrain boots. He had a light tan complexion due to his Aztec ancestry and his Spanish conquistador heritage. He had brown eyes that exuded a life of hardships and trials, shaped by his early years, pursuing honor and heroism, serving his country in the Gulf War, upholding the law in service of the public trust, and always acting with integrity and values. These past jobs had a lot of red tape, office politics, and technicalities. The bureaucracy was a series of obstacles to overcome. This left him feeling like he had little to no change in the world, leaving him looking like the kind of man who'd lost more fights than he'd won, but still kept stepping back into the ring. Perhaps this is why he was often seen wearing black. The trials of life had beaten him mercilessly, leaving him with a dark, absurd view of life. However, this too gave him his much prized, recognizable trait, his paradoxical laughter. Not to say that his outlook on life was all negative, but it had been tainted. However, black is very chic, always in style and very slimming. He was known to wear different shades of blue at times. As Odie sat there rereading Robert Louis Stevenson's Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, Lilith was baffled to see Odie surrounded by books centered on mental fortitude, psychology, and self-improvement. Lilith wore an emerald green custom-tailored skirt suit with a double-breasted jacket and matching scarf. She wore a custom-made, expensive diamond necklace and gold wristwatch. More importantly, she was the living embodiment of a cruel, cold-blooded, cutthroat businesswoman. Everything she wore was luxurious, from her Gucci aviators to her sleek black Prada shoes. She was Caucasian with fair skin, of German descent, slim and well-toned. She took great care of her appearance, which exaggerated her feminine features. Without making that extra effort, she'd appear more tomboyish. Not having said anything, Lilith sat directly across from Odie, occupying the same booth. "Why?" Odie asked, his nose buried in the book. With a smirk on her face, Lilith replied, "I suppose that's the only question that matters to you. Philosophers everywhere have tried to answer that same question for hundreds of years without success. Why? Yes, very true. But why is it that whenever I sit down to read this book, someone appears from out of nowhere to prevent me from reading it? Is this my fate, to not have a moment's peace? Oh, why have the gods cursed me so? It's as if they hexed me by saying, "Let him starve for knowledge, peace, and tranquility, yet be stopped at every turn." Oh my God, Odie, you are so extra. And you're basic. It seems I'm too much for you, and if I'm too much for you, then you're just not enough for me. Perhaps you'd prefer something with a little less flavor. Odie, are you so desperate for answers that you'd resort to looking for them in a children's book? Yes, I am. Odie lifted his head from the book in a surprised reaction. I haven't heard that name in a very long time. No one calls me Odie anymore. Who are you? What a silly name, Odie. Like the lovable cartoon dog and sidekick to Garfield, the cat from those silly comic strips. I understand you also draw silly things for the disreputable paranormal news satire article. Good news. You were the one who drew the illustrations accompanying the urban legend stories, Gator and Sewers Attack, Secret Messages and Rock Songs, and I Divorced Bigfoot. I'm Lilith, and I'm here on behalf of your dear old Uncle Sam. We're in desperate need of your help. Really? Well, I'm flattered, but sorry, not interested. Also, Odie was a shortening of Odysseus, an alias I've used over the years. And yes, I did draw those illustrations, but I've moved up into writing journalism. I was the one who finished writing the story on secret messages found when certain songs are played backward. So you see, I'm far too busy drawing silly illustrations and writing silly stories to help you, or our dear old Uncle Sam. But your country needs you. Your government needs you. I need you, Odie. Oh, sure, you need me now, but what about afterwards? What will become of me? What horrible fate awaits the great Odysseus on this call to adventure? Said Odie, turning his head and pointing at the facial scar on his right cheek. Scars can be found both on the surface and deep inside a man. Imagine the emotional scars left on a war veteran. Not pretty. All I want now is peace of mind. America was here long before I was, and it will continue to be long after I am gone. I know this is sudden and unexpected. That you've moved on and picked up from where you left off. That you're picking up the pieces of your old life and putting them back together as best you can, and that can't be easy. Lilith, you must understand that for me it's hard to adapt to the here and now. I must continuously remind myself that I'm not in constant danger, and that I'm not presently in a war-torn country. I find myself looking over my shoulder for potential threats, on guard, just waiting for something bad to happen. But you see, your experience in the army, your time in a war-torn country, and prior work in law enforcement make you the perfect candidate. You see, people are dying, falling from rooftops, jumping in front of trains, drowning without a fight. The papers call it suicide. I call it something else. I'm begging you to help us, because everything in your psychological profile tells me that you have what it takes to take this case on. You were one of only 5 names found to be most capable of completing this peculiar mission. Odie caught a peek at something Lilith placed on the table. Grainy photos stared back at him, faces he'd seen in headlines, now reduced to corpses. One stood out, a photograph of a man sprawled on the pavement, eyes glassy, music notes scribbled in ink beside the body. It was a co-worker and acquaintance, a true journalist, a real writer, and an employee who he had replaced Clerk Kennan. I think you might have me confused with someone else. Little thinking and logic reasoning on my part, and one could argue that makes me a bit above the rest. Plus, I'm way out of practice. I'm a civilian now. I work in an office. Besides, it sounds like you have a lot of options to choose from, likely way better qualified than me, you. Really should ask them first. Unless... A sudden realization dawned on him. You already have, hence why you're here. Why else would I be here? Why else would you ask me of all people? You're right. Our other options are problematic. They're not in the best of health, trustworthy, or reliable to perform their duty for their government. Gee, I wonder why. But I'm too old and beat up for it. This is a young man's game. I hurt all over, aches and pains everywhere. My body has been through a lot of physical abuse over the years. I'm overwhelmed with pain, physically and emotionally, daily. There's a war inside of me, and if I'm alive, war is alive in me. I'm sorry, but I can't help you. I couldn't, even if I wanted to. Odie, I'm quite aware of your past exploits, as well as your medical history. All too common for men in your previous line of work. I know of your traumatic brain injury, tinnitus, and post-traumatic stress disorder. But worst of all is your depression, chronic lower back pain, and bruised knees. All these injuries piled on top of one another, all because you placed your health in jeopardy in service to your country. Tell me, why? Some would say patriotism, others valor and heroism. But in the end, many philosophers have tried to answer that same question for hundreds of years, to no avail. No one knows why. I'm also quite familiar with the most used remedies, combinations of meds to manage the pain, the abundant use of alcohol to calm your nerves, combined with occasional therapy to help with your outward look on life. But you see, our other options border on the criminally insane, handicapped, missing persons, or deceased. Ha 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 ha. I think that explains exactly the reason why I shouldn't do this. More importantly, Lilith, allow me to explain the intricacies of modern war to you. Not since General Dwight D. Eisenhower has war had the same purpose or meaning. Unfortunately, soldiers before and after the Second World War have been used as pawns to further others' agendas. Wars make certain people rich, powerful, and influential. War is usually all about protecting corporate self-interests. I understand you feel used and betrayed, that Uncle Sam abandoned you at your moment of need, and for that I apologize. Coming home from the Gulf War couldn't have been easy. I'm sorry. However, this new adversary threatens to broadcast a tune that'll kill millions, possibly billions, while dancing happily to the symphony. One song, and people forget themselves. They leap, they drown, they obey. I know the last thing you want is to undertake a dangerous mission, but I've learned that men with your skill set will take on the job for the right price. They're called mercenaries, also known as soldiers of fortune. I don't suppose I could pay you handsomely for your services. Have you claimed your loyalty to me and our cause? No, Lilith, not for all the money in the world. Odie rose from his seat and began packing his things into his backpack. You can't buy loyalty, Lilith. That's not how true loyalty works. Now, if you'll excuse me, I must leave for work and write about Elvis's sightings or alien encounters that likely never happened. Also, I don't want to be late for work. Hanging his backpack over his right shoulder, all his books and study materials now inside, Odie checked his pants pockets. He pulled out his wallet to tip the waitress who was making her way around the corner. His wallet bore the words, "If you can read this, it means you are awake." Granted, it looked odd and out of place on his dark brown bifold pleather wallet, which his mom had given him as a reminder when Odie needed to know whether he was dreaming or experiencing real-life moments. Lilith handed Odie what looked like her business card. Odie, perhaps after taking some time to think it over, you'll change your mind. When you do, call me. The business card bore the name of the private security company, SDL, which stood for Secure, Defend, and Logistics. Just below it, it read, Lilith Penelope, President. With its company motto, protecting your greatest treasures, be it people or material. Alongside it was their logo, a dragon guarding a treasure chest upon which it stood. Something in her voice scratched at the part of him that still cared, the part that hadn't been drowned in work. SDL was an infamous private security and logistics company whose image had been tainted in the past by media coverage of the company, seriously injuring innocent bystanders or worse. It was Uncle Sam's middleman, an independent private security company that recruited and carried out government-sanctioned missions. The answer lies not only in operating overseas, but more importantly, within the country. The government can't self-incriminate itself or be connected to unsanctioned and unlawful acts. Hence, SDL was largely funded by U.S. government contracts. Most, if not all, employed under SDL were longtime civil employees, private contractors, or consultants no longer affiliated with the U.S. government. Highly unlikely, but quite a persistent effort on your part, said Odie, taking the business card and placing it in his pants pocket. Odie, why did you come here and not the school's library like you usually do? Just then, the prettiest girl to ever walk the face of the earth, Kathy, the waitress, appeared from around the corner. She seemed to be of Hispanic descent, was slim, with a petite frame, long curly brown hair, and stood at 5 feet 2 inches. Her best feature was her smile. It lit up the whole room and gave you the feeling that everything would be okay. It was one of those smiles, the kind you might see in a toothpaste commercial. In what was obvious to all the patrons and waitstaff, in an unspoken agreement amongst them, no one ever mentioned Odie's infatuation with her. She took his breath away, his eyes widened, and his jaw dropped. If anyone could have chosen a love song that fit perfectly with the atmosphere, it would have been the romantic 1970s hit song Close to You by the Carpenters. Should have sent a poet, said Odie, short of breath. Dressed in her uniform, semi-formal attire, a white dress shirt, double short sleeves, blue jeans, and an apron. The waitress wore the restaurant's logo, Caesar's Table. She approached their booth and began clearing their table, leaving an empty plate that had once held a slice of apple pie a la mode, and left Odie's coffee cup where it sat. How was everything? Kathy asked, giving that award-winning smile. Pretty good, said Odie, all flustered. Well, I'm glad you enjoyed it. You two have a nice day. Thank you for coming. Thank you, both Odie and Lilith exclaimed as Kathy, the waitress, turned and walked away. Odie's gaze was still on Kathy. Oddly, Kathy nearly dropped the plate as she walked away. She appeared to have butterfingers, a poor attribute for a waitress, perhaps a wrist injury from carrying trays of unevenly heavy food. A common injury among waitstaff is de caravan tenosynovitis, affecting waitstaff due to repetitive wrist and thumb motions, such as carrying trays, lifting plates, and gripping pitchers. It causes inflammation, resulting in pain, swelling, and stiffness. Lilith arrogantly voiced her opinion, the great Odysseus. In the end, are you so simple? A beat-up relic of a bygone war, reduced to a sad little man who dreams of a better tomorrow and the promise of love. To be the king of the castle and have his queen by his side. A small man with big dreams. With the most annoyed look on earth, Odie responded, I don't like you. More importantly, you don't know me at all. You think my file will tell you everything that shapes who I am. But no, it won't. Perhaps this small encounter will help you ease into the idea that I'm not the man for the job. And with that, Odie walked away and made his way to his beat-up old car, a 1969 Ford Bronco, 302 V8. Once inside, he paused and thought of all that had taken place, his encounter with Lilith, the call to action by his government, and the mysterious mission Lilith had attempted to recruit him for. He had no desire at all to put his personal health and immediate family through yet another traumatic experience. When Odie came back home from the Gulf War, his only support system was his immediate family. Family was everything to him. After the Gulf War, Uncle Sam did little to help Odie cope with his inner demons. Odie felt he had done everything Uncle Sam had asked of him, only to not be repaid in kind. Uncle Sam had given him little help reintegrating into civilian life as a contributing, functional member of society. Uncle Sam had more than enough money to wage its wars and make bad investments, but not to take care of its citizens. Odie felt alone trying to cope with all the emotions stirring up inside of him. Feelings of unhappiness, feelings of anger, and fear. Feelings were brought up unintentionally on top of his ailments and chronic pains. Odie turned his car key to start it, the engine fired to life, and he moved the vehicle from the parking to its starting position. Placing his boot on the accelerator and pressing down, the car began to move forward. Having driven forward less than a foot, the car's engine simply turned off. Odie knew it was the alternator. He'd been needing to fix it. All he could do now was call his papa by payphone for help. Odie just laughed. Ha 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 ha. It was his signature trademark, his paradoxical laughter. He laughed so hard and uncontrollably that it was contagious. Anyone within earshot would have been swayed to laugh with him. Chapter 2. It was Tuesday. Alexander the Great had his warhorse, Bucephalus. Napoleon Bonaparte had his white stallion, Marengo. Hercules had his winged horse, Pegasus. And Odie had his noble Ford Bronco, better known as Blanca. The bond between a man and his horse, motorcycle, or car is wholesome and sacred. It's more than just a means of travel. It's a friend and companion, a means of freedom, a means of escape from a prison that is somewhere undesirable. That's why Odie, emotionally invested in his car, felt deep pain when he found it inoperable. This left him feeling both a great sadness and even greater anger. Having just called his papa from a payphone to ask for help because of car trouble, all Odie could do now was wait inside his Ford Bronco. Odie didn't like waiting, but luckily for him, one of many skills he'd picked up in the army was patience, partly due to being stalled by his supervisors, their unwillingness to commit, and poor treatment of him as a leader. In addition to being forced to wait long periods in uncomfortable settings without any accommodation whatsoever. The army gave Odie many skills. One of them was waiting for hours at a time for no reason without going completely insane. Giving in to the old army saying, "Hurry up and wait." Some practice. This car was his most prized possession. He'd driven other cars before, but he'd never found them to be very fitting. This car was white, used, and resembled those off-road camping trucks. Over time, he'd grown overly attached and protective of his car, naming her Blanca. He took good care of her, kept her clean, and always made sure she had a full tank of fuel. He'd play the radio and sing to 90s music, gather his friends, and go to the bar. He'd pick up his then-girlfriend Phoebe K. Cates and take her out to dinner and make out with her in the back seat. One time he even slept in the car, because he'd been too drunk to drive. He'd accumulated tons of good memories in that car, giving it an abundance of sentimental value. Blanca was more than just a car to him. She was a safe place to be, a sanctuary, a haven. A way to escape the stressors and worries of life by simply riding and cruising down the road, playing Rare Earth's song, "I Just Want to Celebrate" on the car radio, and feeling the wind blow against his face. Just him and the open road, nothing else. It gave him the freedom to come and go as he wished. The car had all the qualities he'd wanted. It was surprisingly spacious inside, practical, and most important of all, upgraded. Odie had his car stuffed with several old, outdated thesauruses in the car's inner walls. most of them from his school's library. This was to improve the car's resistance to most gunfire, primarily non-armor small-caliber rounds. Granted, the likelihood of him ever needing this feature in his now mild-mannered civilian life was unnecessary, but it gave him peace of mind, and Odie knew that if something cost you your peace of mind, then it was too high a price to pay. His logic was that most non-armor-piercing bullets would penetrate most thesauruses to the depth of about an inch or two, so long as said thesauruses measure 8.5 inches wide by 11 inches long, with a depth and thickness of 2.5 inches. However, behind a layer of steel, it's more like 1/4 of an inch. On top of this, he had all but one of the car windows replaced with dual-layer high-density polycarbonate, better known by its brand name, plexiglass. Odie's papa, Pedro, had arrived playing Tennessee Ernie Ford's 1974 song, 16 Tons. Unfortunately, the volume from Pedro's Volkswagen Transporter radio did little to cover up the series of noises his car made, yet Pedro was completely oblivious to the car noises. In what seemed like a cruel joke played on Odie by God, this act embarrassed Odie in front of all the pretty women in his immediate vicinity. Odie's face turned bright red with embarrassment. He even considered pretending not to know his papa, but he couldn't bring himself to do it. It was surprising how Odie stood there living and breathing, as this small yet impressionable spectacle for all to see would have easily made any normal mortal man die of embarrassment. Pedro looked wild in his bright yellow 1971 Volkswagen Transporter. It was as if he yelled, "Pay attention to me. I seek validation from strangers and can only value my self-worth through compliments and the jealousy of those around me." Pedro had been a factory worker for most of his life. It was very common to see him in his work uniform, a worn, torn dark mustard jumpsuit. He was 53, approximately 5 feet 10 inches, weighing about 250 lbs. He wore thick black glasses that gave him a well-read appearance, and his wild white hair told of his many life experiences. Parking next to his son, Pedro looked at Odie, his face exuding joy and confidence. Pedro, it seemed, had the deep need to uplift everyone around him, to try and make everyone laugh, whether it was at his jokes or even at his own expense. Even if it meant telling ridiculous, silly dad jokes. If 1 out of 100 made you laugh, it was a success in his eyes. He often made a joke out of everything. It was hard to have a serious conversation with him, because he was so immature. "Hola, papa," said Odie happily, surprised. "Hijo mío," said Pedro with a load of enthusiasm. Although Odie's papa had worked in a factory and performed physical labor for much of his life, he was a scholar, a Renaissance man, and a musician at heart. Being a passionate reader had given him tiny bits of information on various subjects, thanks in part to his vast and diverse interests. This made him a jack of all trades, but a master of none. Reading combined his love of literature and criticism. More importantly, music was Pedro's passion. He'd been in choir as a young man, and had taught himself how to play the guitar. Pedro was a very intelligent man, but like everyone else, he was flawed. He, like most, couldn't see the flaws in himself because he couldn't observe himself objectively from a third-party perspective. He might be biased by his firm belief that he was right about everything. Not to mention, he could be childish at times, whenever he believed to be right about something, even though he wasn't. He'd call everyone else crazy. He had difficulty seeing things from a different perspective, objectively considering challenging ideologies, or widening his horizons to new possibilities and revolutionary ideas. Stop me if you've heard this one before. What do you call a Mexican that lost his car? I don't know, Papa. What? Carlos, said Pedro with a big smile, genuinely believing it'd get a huge laugh. As if anyone within proximity who overheard it would laugh so hard, they'd start involuntarily crying and become short of breath, making it difficult to breathe. That they would lose control of their bladder and just pee their pants because it was so funny. Odie sighed to express his deep disappointment at such a lousy joke. Odie thought to himself, a simple joke from a simple man. Thanks for coming, Papa. My car stopped working. I need to leave now or I'll be late for work. Well, get in. I'll drive you. I'll get you there with time to spare. But what about my car? One problem at a time, son. Remember, little by little, inch by inch, step by step. And with that, Odie gathered his belongings and got inside the yellow Volkswagen Transporter as quickly as possible. Gracias, Papa. De nada. Pedro put his steel-toe boot on the gas pedal and took off like a race car driver. He drove that car as if he'd stolen it, taking in speed signs and traffic laws as suggestions rather than actual state-enforced laws to be followed to the letter. He showed no fear of the steering wheel. He gave off a joyous vibe as he sped at top speed and maneuvered around all manner of obstacles. Hey, Papa, how about slowing down a little, please? I'd like to get there in one piece. Okay, Speed Racer, said Odie, putting his seatbelt on. Oh, sorry, son, I forgot. You drive like a little old lady. You mean careful and respectful of the rules of traffic? You say that like it's a bad thing. Also, on an unrelated note, I was offered a job today. No way, that's great, son. Better than working for that paranormal newspaper, Good News, which doesn't appreciate you or is taken seriously by any respectable news outlet. It took me some time to realize that Good News was meant sarcastically. Also, most of its stories are made up and revolve around the paranormal. Please, Papa, don't remind me. I know the company I work for and its bad reputation. But yeah, about that job offer. I turned it down. It wasn't for writing or drawing, or being creative, or having anything to do with any artistic talent. Well, what was it for? Who was it and what did they want? It was a private security company called SDL. They're well known for recruiting Army veterans and retired policemen, rumored to have mercenaries within their employees. They're also rumored to have worked for the government from time to time, providing security and transporting goods. Ay Dios mío! It's like you've been branded, Mr. Army Man. It's next to impossible to have others see you as anything else. I know for certain that, in time, people will notice and appreciate you for things beyond your military training and mighty course of action. I believe in you, son. Heck, I bet you'll be awarded a Pulitzer one day, maybe tomorrow. Ha 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 ha. Yeah, right. Or perhaps the Nobel Peace Prize, huh? But thanks for believing in me, Papa. So, did you tell this guy to go bother someone else? Well, not exactly. It was a woman, the president of SDL herself, Miss Penelope Lilith. What a strange name, Lilith. After the first wife to Adam in a story shared from Babylonia, Sumerian, and Assyrian mythology. Both were comprised and formed in clay. But Lilith left the Garden of Eden only to be demonized and labeled the mother of all demons. Anyway, she was very business-oriented, a real classy lady, kind of all business, no joking type of woman, so serious and to the point. That lady... What? But why on earth would this big-shot business lady come to you in person just to offer you a job? I mean, it must mean something, right? It means Uncle Sam doesn't want any of this on paper, strictly word of mouth, off the books and off the record, because it gives the government plausible deniability, I think. That, or maybe they wanted to add a personal touch, have a good look at me, live, and in person. See if they could figure me out. If I gave them some sort of feeling or reaction, well, whatever it might mean. Always have a contingency plan. You've got to have it on ink and paper somehow, a contract, a type of insurance on your part should things go wrong. Preferably written by you in your favor and revised by a lawyer. I don't care if it's on a paper napkin, because I'm sure you're not done hearing from them. You know, all this talk about sketchy private billionaire security and logistics, and a company trying to recruit you into something morally questionable, is messing with my mellowness. Let's listen to some music on the radio. Odie turned to the radio in search of a song to uplift everyone's spirits. It's what his papa wanted. Turning on the car radio and searching for a song, he landed on a radio station playing 1960's The Wanderer by Dion DiMucci. It was a catchy song with a warm vibe. It did help change the atmosphere and help the two forget the upsetting attempted recruitment by a private security business with a not-so-secret collaboration with the US government. As Pedro drove Odie to work, Odie took in the scenery. He looked out his car window and saw ordinary people going about their normal lives, all seemingly content with the repetition of their daily rituals. Individuals from all walks of life, from all different age groups and ethnicities. On the surface, the civilians looked very well put together, decent, and clean-cut. But if one looked more closely, one could see their dissatisfaction and discontent. They were unfulfilled, hollow, and unsatisfied. They ceased to be alive and simply existed, much like lifeless robots or zombies. Maybe it was that Odie was more observant than most people. He, much like a poker player, could read the tells people gave off unconsciously. Maybe it was his time working with law enforcement that helped him notice certain things others didn't. Some suggested he was prone to watching others, like the famous zoologist Jane Goodall, who studies primates and their behaviors, customs, and more. He would see that people themselves were not free, slaves to anxiety, stress, fear, and sadness. Odie couldn't help but ask, "Hey Papa, are you happy? I mean, I can't help but feel that somehow, all of us are unsatisfied with our lives." Whoa, whoa, whoa. Where is this coming from? Of course I'm happy. I wake up very early every day, work for most of the day, pay bills that never seem to end, come home, get a few hours of sleep, and do it all over again. What's not to be happy about? But let's change the subject. Hey, want to hear a joke? Stop me if you've heard this one before. I work so I can buy a car, so I can go to work. Isn't that funny? It's like a never-ending cycle, a paradox, an endless loop that goes on and on forever. Ha ha ha. That was a good one, Papa. I needed a laugh. But Papa, in all seriousness, sorry to cut you off, champ, but can you change the radio station? I only ask because I'd like to hear the winning lottery numbers. I bought a lottery ticket the other day and I haven't checked the results. For all I know, we're millionaires and don't know it yet. Really? But that means we'll have to listen to the news, and I know how much you hate the news. Oh, I don't hate the news, son. I just much rather not know all the evil and suffering that goes on in the world. I'd like to ignore it as much as humanly possible, to avoid it if given the option. Besides, I can stand a moment of pain if it means a lifetime of happiness. Once we win the lottery, then we'll never have to worry about money ever again. Also, don't you love the news? You do work for a newspaper. Sort of. I don't so much love the news as I like staying informed. Plus, every story we get at Good News has a grain of truth. If you look at any myth or legend long and hard enough, you'll find remnants of fact hidden beneath. The city of Troy, once dismissed as myth, was ultimately confirmed as a historical site. I'd say most myths and legends have some truth to them. We, journalists, do go out into the field and conduct in-person interviews. I think that's how we at the newspaper can get away with printing so many wild stories, while always making sure to say, allegedly, not to mention our questionable eyewitnesses. Well, do you have a preference on what radio station to listen to for the winning lottery numbers? Yes, the radio station that's not afraid to tell it like it is. A man of the people who stands up for the little guy and the hardworking class, with a machine-distorted voice, is radio DJ personality Godfrey. At least, that's what he wants to be called. Odie reluctantly began searching for the radio station, knowing his papa had intentionally avoided the issue at hand. The issue was that Odie wasn't happy and wanted more. It never seemed enough for whatever reason. He felt hollow inside. After his time in the army and while pursuing his scholarly endeavors, Odie spent much of his time seeking answers to life's mysteries and the reason for this feeling of emptiness, but never found a single definitive answer. This search for answers is what likely got him his job at Good News. As Odie tuned in to Godfrey's radio station, the radio personality seemed to be in the middle of a rant. Hell is happening? Reports of suicides have skyrocketed. Clerk Kennan, a writer of a newspaper ironically named Good News, was found dead. He jumped onto a pair of train tracks at the Amtrak train station in Fullerton. This suicide closely resembles that of high-power criminal lawyer Martha Murdoch, who jumped off a ship and drowned. Are these incidents linked? They showed no prior indications of suicidal thoughts or drug abuse. Interestingly, abnormal animal behavior was reportedly witnessed by others just before. These suicides, possibly the work of stress, maybe by people who are overworked and underpaid. Or something else? Then the radio station became static. It seemed like radio interference. Nothing out of the ordinary, but still an inconvenience nonetheless. Eventually it came back. Seemed to be experiencing some technical difficulties, folks. Again, static. Suddenly, out of nowhere, swarms of doves began appearing from out of nowhere. The aerial winged creatures flew frantically and at low altitudes, behaving erratically. They started hitting cars and their windows kamikaze style, causing a commotion and chaos. Some flew straight into the cement floor, others into concrete structures. The birds themselves became injured and disoriented, others died upon impact. Pedro slammed on the brakes to avoid a car collision, but his vehicle collided with what appeared to be a stalled car in front of him, causing his yellow Volkswagen van to roll over repeatedly until it came to a stop in the middle of the road. Hot steam poured out of the battered vehicle as an injured Odie, dazed, lightheaded, and in pain, turned to his papa. "Papa, estás bien?" But Pedro did not respond. Odie gathered all his strength. Every move he made felt weighed down on him as if gravity had increased against his favor. It was a Herculean effort to unbuckle himself, which caused him to fall. He then carried his papa out of the car to safety. Barely able to move, Odie held his papa close, feeling pain all over. "Papa, are you okay?" But Pedro did not respond. "Papa? Help! Anybody! Help! I'm sorry, Papa. This is all my fault." The flock of pigeons then rose into the sky and started to fly away, leaving the streets littered with the bodies of dead birds and other debris. Chapter 3. The Call of the Void. Odie, having left the car accident miraculously with minor injuries, sat in the waiting area of the hospital, along with his mom, Reverie, and older brother Mel. He and his family tried to keep calm and collected. The emergency reception area was occupied by relatives of all the patients. Emergency room staff treated many patients with a range of injuries, most of whom arrived on gurneys. The agitated voices and movements of relatives were visible and audible. Dozens of hospital workers scrambled around, taking in patients from the car accidents involved in the massive pileup caused by the strange animal behavior and destruction of the doves. Slowly, the emergency reception area and the hospital itself began to fill with patients, their families, cameramen, and news anchors. A deaf motorcyclist could be heard speaking to a news reporter. His speech patterns and mannerisms, such as using his hands to communicate in American Sign Language, were evident. I was driving my motorcycle when it happened. It was like being hit repeatedly by falling hail, if you've ever had to experience such extreme weather. Or possibly like being stoned by the townspeople. But just before it happened, I had a bad feeling. I felt fear, but also anxiety. It was an uncomfortable feeling that suddenly came over me, and I felt like ending it all. The hours turned to days, and the days seemed to blur together. It was hard to tell how much time had passed. It didn't help that Odie had a terrible concept of time itself. After all, to him, time could drag to a crawl, or speed up to Mach 5 depending on the situation. Odie, his mom, and his older brother waited for one of the doctors to let them know of Pedro's status. The last time Odie had seen his papa Pedro lay on a hospital bed, in a hospital gown, with medical machines surrounding him. Odie hated seeing his papa in that state. It was bizarre and out of place to see Pedro like that. It was like seeing Santa Claus, the jolly fat guy who brings joy and happiness to the world, hospitalized. He looked so fragile, like a Fabergé egg. Pedro was in stable condition, at least that's what Odie had heard a nurse say. Odie kept trying to tell himself that, after some time, his papa Pedro would be back to his normal self, making silly dad jokes, reading, and critiquing. Not to mention playing guitar, singing, and songwriting. Pedro was a Renaissance man. Music was one of his many loves and favorite pastimes. Pedro had been in the choir as a young man, making him an entertainer and performer. This is likely connected to his need to please, uplift, and lift people's spirits. His papa's friends compared him to the famous Mexican musicians of his time, like Pedro Infante and Jorge Negrete, whoever they are. But the most likely scenario is that Odie's papa would become like Humpty Dumpty, a broken shell of his former self. His enormous enthusiasm and monstrous optimism would be on hold due to having been in a serious car accident. The incident and trauma from such an experience would affect any man. Pedro was broken, both figuratively and physically, but as the persistent worker and the family's main provider, he would most likely put himself back together and get back to work. No one could say Pedro wasn't a hard laborer or a good provider. Still, in a weakened, very fragile state, Pedro's appearance was the exact opposite of how Odie normally pictured his papa. This wasn't just any man, he was his hero, his mind's eye of what fatherly and goodwill is, his model of what manhood is, the embodiment of heroism, bravery, and courage. For the lack of a better word, Odie was heartbroken. Odie's mother, Reverie, placed her hand on his shoulder and asked him, "Estás bien?" Odie's mom was always checking in on him to see if he was fine, doing okay, and well. This could at times be overly repetitive. She may have been very smothering to him, unintentionally of course, but still. Likely the result of Odie being the youngest and therefore the baby of the family. It sometimes left him exhausted, but it was her motherly instinct to check in on him. After all moms worry. It's what moms do. Yeah, it's just, I'm still processing this. I don't know what actually happened or why. It makes no sense. 1 minute things are knee, and the next hell breaks loose. And then, as fast as it had started, it suddenly ended. The flock of birds rose into the sky and flew away. Reverie sat next to Odie, listening carefully, trying her best to reassure Odie that everything would be okay. Don't worry, que te preocupes, no va a ayudar. Try to remain calm, control your emotions, or they will control you and lead you astray. Pain is unavoidable. Suffering is optional. Gracias, Mama. Reverie always reminded Odie that keeping calm and collected, staying cool under pressure, and, most importantly, being at peace were essential in life. Always. She placed her arm around him, offering a warm, meaningful embrace that gave him a spark of comfort in the darkest of times. Offering a hug in a time of crisis helped tremendously. Odie could not express in words how much better this simple embrace made him feel. Few things offer more comfort than a hug from a loved one. Reverie continued to console him in his time of need. She was always very good at providing emotional support and some sound advice whenever the need arose. Moms are heroes, often taken for granted. It's a thankless job, but they do it out of love. Reverie was a woman in her early 50s, 5 feet 5 inches tall, often mistaken for a different ethnicity because of her light skin. Most people mistakenly assumed she had ties to the early German settlers who founded Anaheim. She was Mexican, and both her parents were Mexican, with ties to Spain. She always surprised everyone when she spoke Spanish because most people didn't expect it. She had long, curly black hair that reached her shoulders. Her curly hair often did what it wanted, no matter how hard she tried to keep it in place under some elaborate hairstyle. She was always careful to use hairpins to keep her hair still and in place. Her brown eyes conveyed her honesty and good nature. A mother who managed both homemaking responsibilities and a part-time job, all while raising 2 children and keeping the family on their toes, often disregarding personal boundaries or privacy along the way. She managed to raise 2 kids, help them with their homework, cook, and clean. She ran errands, bought groceries, and managed the family budget. She sewed clothes back together and kept the kitchen and bathroom spotless. More importantly, her demeanor and mannerisms suggested a poverty-stricken upbringing, like how frugal she was, her tedious couponing, and her constant bargain hunting. She wore a bright red sweater, likely made from wool and polyester, the kind of sweater that only a mom would wear. On her sweater was a mother bear with a bow on her head and a cub in her arms. Reverie wore a pink blouse, the same shade as bubblegum, which oddly had a calming effect. She wore black formal dress pants and black shoes. Reverie was soft-spoken, an odd trait given she was going deaf. One would imagine she'd speak louder. Her voice made her wholesome nature open to the public. It was tremendously hard to hear what she said. She was not only the strong moral compass of the family, ethical and responsible, but even more importantly, she was the heart and soul. She was the glue that held all the family together. Reverie was a Spanish-speaking woman whose English was, at best, mediocre. This was likely due to a lack of practice. Time was not on her side, given that it was divided among cooking, cleaning, working odd hours at her job, raising a family, and not losing her patience. But also, more so, because of deep embarrassment. Learning something new makes one feel dumb before it makes one wise. Working out makes one feel weak before it makes one strong. Facing one's fears makes you feel terrified before it makes you brave. To heal first you have to suffer, and to have peace you need chaos. Because life disguises growth as failure and progress as pain. But if it feels hard, it probably matters. It breaks who you were to make room for who you're meant to be. You don't build strength by being powerful. You build it by showing up when you feel powerless. Her desire to avoid shame, embarrassment, or even slight discomfort would keep her from advancing in her English. However, another possible reason lies within the city itself. The city of Anaheim was established by German settlers and was culturally diverse from its early days, employing not only Native Americans but also Hispanic residents. Those same German colonists also married into the surrounding Native American and Mexican families. From the very beginning, Spanish-speaking people were entwined with the local populace and everyday customs. So, staying with what one is familiar with and comfortable with, like the Spanish language, was just simpler. Unfortunately, Odie was stuck in his own mind. He couldn't help but question everything, trying desperately to make sense of things, and trying to find a reason or explanation as to how the doves seemed to have lost their motor skills and caused the car pileup. But more importantly, why? Was it an act of God, an act of nature, or was it man-made? I'm trying to remember everything that happened. It was Pop and I in the car. We were talking, listening to the radio. Then the birds went crazy. I don't know if the birds themselves lost control of their motor skills or what exactly. Then there's the car we collided with. The driver became distracted by the chaos. Maybe he was impaired before he got behind the wheel? Possibly a combination of things. Are you angry? Don't be angry. It's not your fault. It was an accident. No hay nada que pudiste haber hecho para impedir lo que pasó. Odie's mom, Reverie, had a hard time expressing herself clearly, or in a way Odie could easily understand. It wasn't so much a language barrier as it was a difference in reasoning. Some might have argued it was because of their age differences, or that Odie was a man and Reverie a woman. Or perhaps it was the years Odie spent away from home, in the service. Maybe a combination of all these things. They rarely, if ever, understood one another. She was like that student in class who would turn in a homework assignment or class project, but had completely misunderstood the assignment's goal because of a difference in interpretation. An example was how she would say oven when she meant microwave oven. When one hears the word oven, one imagines a traditional gas-powered oven. But worst of all was that Reverie was just terrible at correctly telling what Odie's mood was, often assuming he was troubled, upset, or mad for some reason. Maybe it was his outward appearance. When Odie was in the army, he learned never to show weakness, and to look a bit of a brute. This was not to be seen as weak. If so, it was because of the military look he'd picked up and kept. And Reverie always reminded him of that, every time the opportunity arose, expressing her discontent and asking him to smile, to be more gentlemanly, more approachable. Or maybe it was just how he looked naturally when his face sat at rest. This would mean he suffered from a mean mug. In that case, it would have been a curse passed down from his ancestors and embedded in his genetic makeup. This would often get him in trouble with men who were insecure about their inferiority, forcing them to stay in a perceived position of power. But Odie knew it was because he was looked at as a threat. In what way exactly, he didn't know. Attempting to provoke some type of fear or emotionally charged outburst out of him from people like this. The most likely and best explanation was his chronic physical pain, which gave him constant discomfort, and could be the reason that led to the way his face looked. After all, being in constant physical discomfort is unpleasant, and can lead to irritability. No, Mama, I'm just tired. So very tired, but thanks, I just have this feeling. Like, this wasn't just some random accident or an isolated incident, something other than Mother Nature or human error. Something more, something otherworld. Just then, a doctor appeared. Entering the waiting room, he made his way inside, looking around, apparently searching for someone. The doctor was covered from head to toe in a light green long-sleeve surgical gown, a surgical mask, a doctor's cap, and surgical gloves. The doctor walked with purpose toward Odie's family, but as he approached them, Odie couldn't help noticing he was breathing heavily, perhaps struggling to breathe. He seemed short of breath, like he just finished running a marathon. Perhaps the doctor was a heavy smoker, Odie thought. Strange, but not unheard of. After all, everyone knows smoking is bad for your health. It causes a whole series of health problems for the rest of one's life, or till one expires from it. It'll kill you. And yet that still doesn't prevent millions of people from smoking and quitting their bad habits. However, it's a well-established psychological imprint. Humans have a hidden, primal desire to experience excitement through danger in life and death situations. The euphoria of peril, the exhilaration of death. Now standing before them, the doctor held himself in a way that conveyed welcome and made him more approachable. Odie had difficulty seeing the doctor's eyes, partly because of his surgical headlight protective glasses. For whatever reason, the light on the surgical headlight protective glasses was not only on, but also very bright, making it difficult to see all his minor expressions. Odie had to rely solely on the doctor's body language and tone of voice. "Hello, I'm Dr. Harold S. Hudson. I want you to know that Pedro is going to be okay, but he's not out of the woods just yet. He did sustain some blunt force trauma to his head. We won't know the extent of the damage until he wakes up. Once conscious, we'll be able to administer further tests to evaluate his alertness and awareness. He's a very lucky man, given his age and very poor health. He's not in the best of health to begin with, given his lifestyle, and it's because of this he's due for a tremendous, lengthy recovery." Dr. Hudson had a deep, distinctive voice, almost like a bass opera singer or that of a heavy smoker. Reverie began speaking in Spanish, knowing her words would be poorly translated into English by Odie. "Dile al doctor cómo es que Pedro pasó más daño que tú y que tiene de malo. Que, si puede ser más específico en su diagnóstico." "Excuse me, Dr. Hudson, but could you expand on that? I'd like to know the extent of his injuries. Perhaps you could be more specific, please." "I was in the car with him. I need to know how hurt he is compared to me. I believe he took most of the impact. Given his injuries, I do believe he sustained much of the impact when colliding with the other vehicle. One thing to note is that everything, no matter how minute, contributed to how injured he is currently. Everything from how he was positioned, to his body type, to his diet, to his active lifestyle, or lack thereof, etc. As I said before, he suffered blunt force trauma to his head, resulting in a black eye and a broken nose. Not to mention some blood loss." Hearing this news, Odie placed his hand over his heart. His eyelids closed slightly. He exuded a small and uncomfortable grunt sound, as if he had just been punched in the gut. Odie unconsciously expressed some deep emotional pain. The news of his papa's overall extensive physical harm and injuries made Odie feel empathetic for Pedro. His papa's pain and misfortune affected Odie immensely. "Pregúntale al doctor si puedes ir a verlo. Can we go see him? I'd like to see my papa and talk to him." "That's not possible. He's currently unconscious." "Sorry, I meant to say, can the family be with him? I'd like to at least be next to him, even if we can't communicate. We'll do all the talking, and he'll be resting. Maybe, even with him unconscious, something we say may get through to him. About how we're all rooting for him and a speedy recovery. How much we love him." Dr. Hudson paused for a moment, his head lowered slightly as if in deep thought. He turned his head slightly and placed his right hand on his chin, his thumb and index finger forming an L shape. It seemed he was having difficulty deciding on the best course of action. Weighing his options and thinking of all possible outcomes. Considering the situation and the best course of action, he tapped his right foot repeatedly. "Dile al doctor que solo queremos verlo unos minutos. Que lo apreciaríamos mucho. Solo que si se puede y con su permiso. It'll only take a few minutas. No more than 10 minutes maximum. We would really appreciate it. It would give us some peace of mind, but only with your permission. We value your expert opinion as a doctor." As Dr. Hudson waited for Odie to finish loosely translating Reverie's words, the doctor's attention changed to someone behind Odie. Somewhere, not hidden in the background, a person amongst the crowd, all alone. Odie noticed this and glanced over his right shoulder, quickly scanning the general area, looking for anything out of the ordinary. In the hospital waiting room, in a sea of people, loved ones waiting on news of injured family members, and news anchors from the local media, Lilith caught his attention. Always in professional attire, exuding wealth and power, consistently wearing green. She, with a wave of her hand and a look of approval, signaled, and Dr. Hudson obliged. "Very well, if you'll follow me, I'll take you to him. It seems your son here has some powerful connections. Keep in mind that Pedro is currently unresponsive. As agreed, you'll only have 10 minutes with him, no more. Mom, Mel, I'll catch up to you two. I need to talk to the person in charge and get some answers. You'd miss the opportunity to see Papa, to talk to the hospital administrator? Said Mel with a tone that expressed his disapproval. Well, someone must talk to somebody about what happened out there and investigate it. We must understand what happened, so it never happens again. Maybe there's a connection between all the victims. Everyone should be interviewed and have their testimonies written down. See if there's something that connects them all. I like to stay informed, and Dr. Hudson just informed us Papa is going to be okay. That he made it through life-saving surgery. Plus, I hate seeing Papa all beat up like that. Like he got in a fist fight with boxing legend Jose Mantequilla. Odie walked in the opposite direction from his family, toward Lilith. Determined, he walked over to her with no regard for those around him, bumping into people and at times even pushing people out of his path. Odie had inherited the best qualities from his father, his protectiveness of family, but also his worst, his father's temper when the family is threatened or hurt. Odie was neither considerate of others, nor mindful of his impulsive actions. He was his father's son. Chapter 4, Mission Date, September 24th, 1991. Now, inside Lilith's mobile headquarters, a sizable 1983 GMC Vendura surveillance van. Odie demanded answers. The van's interior had been completely refurbished with high-tech equipment. The van's interior featured banks of monitors and a large digital map of Anaheim. The walls, as well as the interior, were covered with paper literature and drawings of monsters, alien spacecraft, ancient Egyptian pictographs, and strange writings. Folders labeled, classified, papyrus scrolls, and magic books drew Odie's attention. Odie took a seat in the van's back right passenger seat, and Lilith sat next to him to his left. The monitors highlighted a structure. As the van's computer system narrowed it down to an exact location, the screen showed the wealthy residential area of Fullerton. The city of Anaheim neighbored Fullerton. Despite their proximity, they were drastically different. The name of the cross street was displayed for all to see, soon followed by an address. Okay, we have our next location, said Lilith with a tone that suggested intense focus. The computer seems to have detected some mild yet increasing seismic activity. I'm sure that soon strange happenings will begin. Let's just hope we four can stop it. Now all we need is our on-field surgeon. After all, every tactical team needs a medic. He'll be here momentarily. Wow, wait a minute, Lilith. Are you saying that we four are a team? You, me, this mysterious field medic of yours, and your woman chauffeur? Not to mention, small tremors are normal, given that we do live in the great state of California. We have tremors and earthquakes all the time. The woman chauffeur, seated behind the wheel, turned her whole body, except for her left hand, which she kept on the steering wheel. She faced Odie. You're late to the party, little man. These tremors are not your typical California earthquake signs. They're different, and very significant to all of us. They call me Circus Strong Woman, or just Strong Woman. I've heard a lot about you, little man, and they say you have a lot of mental fortitude, that you possess real strength of will. I think that's just another way of saying you're stubborn. What I find more fascinating is how everyone talks about your supposed keen, arguably great, sense of observation. A real Sherlock Holmes amongst us. A bit of an exaggeration, I think. No one is that good. Looking up at Strong Woman's tremendous stature despite her being seated, Odie thought to himself. They should have called her the belittling snub giant, because she was not only very large and muscular, but lacked cordiality. Odie began to eye Strong Woman up and down, trying to extract data. Excuse me, Strong Woman, I guess that's just a matter of opinion. I never said any of the sort. Granted, I pick up on a few things, and I guess in Lilith's opinion, she must think very highly of me. Also, don't call me little man. You are, after all, freakishly tall. Everyone to you is small and punny. Well, at least you're honest. Yes, I'm a real honest Injun. I'm also a trained marksman and investigative journalist. I served in the armed forces during the Gulf War and worked in law enforcement, so I know a little about police procedure and the criminal mind. But you know what, my little Injun? I think there's no place for you here, nor any need. I'm the muscle of the team, Doc's the brain, and Lilith is the individual. She's the decision maker. Plus, everyone I've just mentioned knows how to use a sidearm, me included. Personally, I think it's a bad idea to have you here. You're a drinker. That's bound to affect your coordination and reaction time, among other things. Strong Woman was built like an Olympic athlete, taller and more muscularly defined than the average person. She was around 6 feet 6 inches tall. Although very muscular and somewhat masculine, she had a distinctly alluring, pear-shaped figure. Her hair was brown, long, and coarse, which she'd tied up into a ponytail. She had large brown eyes, thick eyelashes, and tan skin. She was Persian, and her beautiful almond eyes gave it away. Strong woman dressed in an arrangement of earth-brown tones and different shades of black, wearing somewhat of a punk attire, with her dark brown torn jeans and black boots. She also wore a brown gold t-shirt with a black leather jacket. Damn it, strong woman, don't start a fight with him. He's part of the team. He's part of the bigger picture. I've recruited and trained with the best. I am a scary judge of talent. Yes, he's a little rough around the edges, but look at all of us misfits and outcasts. But with the right leader, we can accomplish great things. And where the hell is Doc? Unknown to everyone on board the van, Doc stood just outside the van's passenger side window. He'd just come to a complete stop and had heard part of the conversation. "Speak of the devil, and he shall appear," said Dr. Hudson, in his deep voice. "Sorry, I'm late, but I was attending to a patient. In my defense, it only took a few minutes more than I originally planned. I know a few minutes is important to you, but I'm a doctor and scientist first, not one of your Minutemen." Opening the passenger front door, he placed his medical bag inside. Wearing a black fedora and a black trench coat, keeping his head down, Dr. Hudson did his best to stay hidden from public eyes. "Wait a sec. I know that voice. Dr. Hudson?" Taking his seat next to Strong Woman and closing the door next to him, Dr. Hudson finally took his hat off and lifted his head, as if now free to be himself despite obvious reasons for hiding. Dr. Hudson was covered in bandages from head to toe, like one imagines a mummified mummy from ancient Egypt to be. Although covered in bandages, Dr. Hudson still walked around wearing clothes, a hat, and sunglasses. Now, with his hat off, sitting up straight and no longer hiding from the public eye, Dr. Hudson turned to Odie and said, "Yes, it is I, Dr. Hudson. Forgive my appearance. It's not my intention to frighten you, but long ago, there was a fire. I was badly burned, and now I'm forced to hide behind these medical bandages." Odie noticed the engine start, then the vehicle moved, so he put on his seatbelt. He now had a new, profound view of seatbelts. After his papa's car accident, he intended to wear them wherever they were available. As the van picked up speed and headed to its destination, it was slightly hard to sit comfortably in the van as it sped through traffic, taking sharp turns and being unapologetic about the rules of the road. "How's my papa? Is he okay? Will someone please explain to me what's going on?" Lilith turned to Odie, placed her hand on his left shoulder, and said, "It's about your father, Pedro, and his actions." "What about him?" "He's a simple factory worker, and has been for most of his life. He works on the assembly line at an aviation manufacturing factory. Nothing incredibly interesting or out of the ordinary. He's overworked and underpaid, and almost everyone is. He always talks about never having enough money, and how the struggle from debt to financial freedom is a tough endeavor." Lilith's face changed to express her awkwardness on the topic. "He was once employed by me. Long ago, we met through a chance encounter, in the business of protecting priceless valuables and their safe transport and drop-off. I took a new approach. I used misdirection." Odie knew what Lilith was about to say. It was the only thing that would answer the connection between his papa and her company, SDL. "You're all illegal smugglers, and you had my papa smuggle and deliver something for you? But why? You have a small army, armored vehicles, trained and armed professionals. I used misdirection. Your father was part of that plan, and it worked out beautifully. This item, long thought to be a myth, is both powerful and dangerous. Others believe it's a weapon beyond comprehension, made from a long-lost science. But those who believe in its existence, and have long searched for it, tried to steal it from SDL as we were transporting it to a buyer. Luckily, it was safely transported and delivered by your father, Pedro. No one would have ever suspected him of all people. As common and ordinary as every other hard-working, stiff, low-paid, manual laborer. Like those before him, a commoner, an everyman. Hey, that's my papa you're talking about. Could you stop describing him as one of your servants and making him sound so inferior? So he not only had the real package but delivered it personally and undamaged. Maybe you should add an old-school, hard-working man to the list of adjectives of my papa. Correct, as I found myself in dire financial need amidst the Gulf War and its negative economic impact, I began to explore new and alternate means of profit. I soon found myself dabbling in illegal smuggling. Oh no, I don't believe it. My father wouldn't. He's a law-abiding citizen, and he wouldn't place himself in such a predicament. He'd first sell all his personal belongings before he'd transport anything illegal for you and your company. I'm sorry, but I don't believe this. Sure, he's flawed like everyone else, the same frailties as all humans, who isn't, but suppose I believed you. What the hell did you give him anyway? The spear of destiny, some cardboard x-ray glasses, magic beans. What? Surprisingly, none of those things. I've had many illegal things smuggled over time, including ancient artifacts. Pedro moved an unusual musical instrument, a flute rumored to be the legendary Pied Piper's flute. Piped Piper's flute, like from the children's fairy tale The Pied Piper of Hamelin? Yes, the very same, named after the German town of Hamelin, where the folklore was established. The legend dates to the Middle Ages, the tale of a piped piper who was a rat catcher, hired by the town to lure rats away with his magic flute into the Weser River, where they drowned. When the citizens of Hamelin refused to pay a fortune as promised, the piped piper retaliated by using his instruments, magical power, on their children, leading them away. In some versions of the story, the children followed him out of town and into a cave, to a beautiful land never to be seen again. Interpret that however you'd like. Eesh, I see now where the expression, "it's time to pay the piper," comes from. It's a revenge story. Okay, I like to think I'm open to new and wild ideas, but I'm not gullible either. You've got to give me something, anything, to help me believe you. Okay, fair enough. Strong woman, do something humanly impossible for our newest member. Strong woman kept her eyes on the road, but began to unholster her sidearm. She, now with a weapon in hand, purposely released the magazine with all its ammunition, letting it drop to the floor. Holding a now empty handgun, she began to place it in the palm of her hand. Odie, still waiting for something to happen, saw. Strong woman crumple the handgun in her hand, as if it were made of cheap, thin cardboard. The handgun was a twisted mass of metal and steel. She handed it to Odie for inspection. He took it, inspected it, and determined it was real. He'd just witnessed something humanly impossible, and with that, all he could do was express his surprise. Okay, well, that just happened. I guess I'll choose to leave you. No normal human being can take a handgun and crumble it up in their hand. You still haven't explained why I need to be part of your military-style tactical team. After all, Strong Woman made some wry valid points. I'm getting to that. As I was saying, Pedro not only transported the flute, but hand-delivered it to the buyer himself, who only ever used the alias, Mr. Devoid. No one knows the buyer's true name. I'm sorry to say, Mr. Devoid is likely the man who got your father, Pedro, seriously hurt and in that hospital room. What? How could you? You placed my papa in danger when you had him transport Piped Piper's flute and hand-deliver it to Mr. Devoid. My papa should never have been placed in that situation by you and your company. He's an old man, and he's not as physically able as he used to be. My papa worked for you. He trusted you. And now he's in the hospital because of you and Mr. Devoid. Why would he illegally smuggle an ancient, priceless artifact? He already has a job at the factory. Why? Tell me why. Because Iraq's invasion of Kuwait elevated oil prices. It roiled the global energy market and boosted crude oil prices sharply higher. This caused the economy to decline, leading to price increases across the board and to people everywhere accumulating significant debt due to stagnant wages. More importantly, people are losing their jobs, and unemployment is up. Work has dropped, and companies everywhere are firing people to stay afloat, while others are closing their doors for good. Your father was desperate. With a family to provide for, needing to put food on the table, and a roof over your head, he saw no other way. It was a moment of weakness. To provide for your family, he needed to break the law. Your father's mistake was one Pedro was not proud of. But he's a criminal now. That doesn't make him a bad man. I've known good criminals and bad cops, honorable thieves, and despicable philanthropists. You can be on one side of the law or the other, but he broke the law. He's now a criminal, a good one, a bad one that's up to him. Regardless of what kind, he knew the risks involved, and still decided to take those risks. Odie let out a disappointing sigh. All this, it's not how I pictured my papa. Breaking the rules, disobeying the law, it's impossible from what I know of his character, but I suppose he's only human, and we all make mistakes. A lot of things for you were not possible before today. You have the skills. You're going to hunt Mr. Devoid, the one truly responsible for putting your father in the hospital. Because the truth is, I know you want to hunt him down like a wild animal and hurt him badly, but more importantly, you want out of this mundane, painful, and hollow feeling you've experienced in your civilian life. A life where you're forced to work tremendously hard towards a predetermined destiny. What can only be compared to the low working class of the early 19th century. The Industrial Revolution, with their dangerous working conditions, unfair wages, and feelings of unfulfillment. Yes, you're right. This place, this feeling of emptiness and unfulfillment, is insanity. I am a cursed man. I am damned to long for a place and time long forgotten. A place that endowed me with a sense of purpose and belonging, where camaraderie is law, where no one suffered alone. A place and time where life was simple. I know what it sounds like. It sounds unbelievable. But you wouldn't understand it unless you had lived it. My mind was broken and reassembled into a weapon, and weapons are made for warfare. We go to war because we all want the same thing. To see children grow strong, to provide our families with safety, and to live in quiet times. That is why we became soldiers, to fight for a peaceful world. I am a man misplaced in time and place. Life can be so miserable. It can feel so meaningless, so empty. And now you know everything. Your father, Pedro, worked for me as an independent contractor in SDL, the security and logistics company. Pedro, under my instructions, illegally smuggled an ancient and powerful artifact, a musical instrument, the piped piper's flute. Long thought to be a thing of myth, rumored to be a work of incomprehensible science by some, but very real and extremely dangerous. He delivered it to a buyer whose identity is a mystery. All we know is his alias, Mr. Devoid. Unfortunately, Mr. Devoid, now with a flute in hand, has decided to try and erase all possible tracks that could be linked back to him, one being your father. Wait, that doesn't answer everything. I still have some unanswered questions. Does that mean my papa is in danger? And why did Mr. Devoid use doves to try to kill my papa? I understand the flute itself has powers, and can strongly influence and control others, be they animals or men. So why use the pigeons to cause a car accident, and not have my papa do it himself? Allow me to answer that I've not only medically examined your father, but have a working theory. If I had to guess, this would make it look more like an accident, an act of God, or maybe a result of Mother Nature. The car pileup wouldn't have raised many questions regarding your father's emotional state, mental fitness, or logic and reasoning. However, having him deliberately drive into oncoming traffic would have raised many questions and suspicion. Of course, that's just a working theory. It could be several things. As for your father, if Mr. Devoid falsely believes Pedro is in a coma, he is safe. After all, Pedro poses no threat to him while unconscious, until he's eventually released from the hospital with a clean bill of health, I guess. But still, I don't know how I feel about just having left without seeing my papa. Also, it feels odd knowing he's there just out in the open. And what if he wakes up? Then he'll be completely exposed. Dr. Hudson, you must do something. Dr. Hudson, in his loud and deep voice, reassured Odie. No need to worry. Under my instructions, Pedro is to be believed by all to be in a coma, whether he is or not. Also, for safety measures, we have men standing guard. Well, that's a relief. It's like he's hiding in plain sight. Dr. Hudson, where are we headed? Odie, you may remember Lilith saying that our computer had detected some mild, yet increasingly seismic activity. Well, after the events of the birds and the massive car pileups, as a man of science, I looked through historical archives of animals and their strange behaviors just before a tragedy struck. I found countless reports of animals' premonitions and concluded they have a kind of doom detector. Animals became nervous, agitated, or fled. It occurred to me that animals might be able to detect sound vibrations. The birds reacted to sound vibrations, the sound vibrations which created sound waves. These, in turn, travel the world by different means of transport, such as air and water, but most importantly, by land, creating seismic activity. By tracking these tremors, we can predict the location of Mr. Devoid by his magic flute. So, Dr. Hudson, where are the tremors or the seismic activity originating from? Some sort of music venue, a large concert hall perhaps, or an electronic speaker store. Not even close, little man. It's a school, said Strong Woman in an ironic tone. A nearby college, to be precise. Fullerton College. Wait, which one? Because there's more than one college that's referred to as Fullerton College. One has an elephant as its mascot, and the other has a hornet as its mascot. Odie looked at the banks of monitors to his right and at the large digital map display. They highlighted the point of origin of the tremors with a clef icon. The musical symbol is used widely in newspaper comic strips to indicate a tune. Oh shit, we're going to my school. We're going to Fullerton College. Chapter 5, The Road of No Return. As students, teachers, and others arrived at Fullerton College, they began to run from the premises. It appeared that animals from the school's research laboratories had not only begun behaving oddly, but some had even escaped their captivity. This created chaos and panic on the school grounds. A multitude of animals, from lab rats and all manner of winged animals, filled the school campus. Also, what was likely dogs who'd happened to be near the premises, most likely beloved lost animal pets, service animals, and animals from the wild like coyotes now loose on school grounds, began to behave rather strangely. People ran from the animals. Odie couldn't help but feel sympathy for the animals that seemed both scared and agitated. It was like half the animals were running away or hiding, while the other half was ready to attack anyone they perceived as a threat. It was like a fight-or-flight response. Campus security had barely begun to take control of the situation, communicating with one another over their radios. It was apparent that they were completely unprepared for this unlikely scenario. Amid the chaos, a few students had made their way to their cars and escaped. But it seemed everyone had the same idea: get to their cars and drive away from the school grounds as fast as possible. This was the team's reasoning. As the school's parking lot began to empty, this entire fiasco was good for Lilith and her newly assembled tactical team. Odie, Dr. Hudson, Strong Woman, and Lilith herself. This left them pretty much free to park anywhere without arousing any unwanted attention. They parked near the apparent source of the seismic activity and waited for Lilith's orders. She, having taken her role as team leader, said, "Okay, so this is where our wanted serial killer Mr. Devoid is, and where our magic flute is being used. Now to hunt down this psycho and put an end to him for the attempted murder of SDL employees, the death and injury from said car accident pileup of innocent bystanders as they drove one seemingly normal day, and the cruelty to animals. He's not only broken the laws of man, but also committed crimes against nature. Let's get this crazy bastard." Odie was experiencing all kinds of emotions. Adrenaline began to kick in, rushing through him. He was overwhelmed. The hair on the back of his neck stood up. He took deep breaths, and his heart began to race. But he also remembered that he was always very well prepared, briefed extensively on the mission, and every detail surrounding it. He usually wore protective gear and body armor, and carried a weapon, be it a handgun, long rifle, or machine gun. Am I the only one here that's wondering how we four are going after this Mr. Devoid, and plan on not being affected by his magic flute? I mean, I would imagine we don't want to be exposed to any sounds created by the flute itself. Please tell me we're not going in there, guns blazing, without some sort of plan, or slight advantage." "That's right, Odie. Because of that, as team leader, having used my underground black market connections through my logistics company SDL, I have obtained experimental high-tech military protective helmets that should protect us from the flute's hypnotic music, but still allow us to communicate with each other through written messages that are displayed in the helmet's protective screen visor. If it's spoken aloud, the high-tech helmet will register it, record it in its memory bank, process it, and finally write it down for all to see on your screens in real time. This highly experimental helmet was created for a variety of uses, including defending against sonic attacks, translating languages, detecting danger, and providing night vision. But remember, these are all prototypes, not in production at any level. These are experimental, and we four are the ones testing them. It's like watching television with the sound off but with the closed captions turned on. Essentially, subtitles for the hearing impaired." She signaled to the very back of the van and began searching for the van's backspace. It seemed that's where all types of equipment, from helmets and bulletproof vests to guns and knives, were stored. Now, I don't need to explain how we're all to refer to each other by our aliases. A letter of the alphabet previously assigned specifically to each one of you. Me being referenced only as L. Or do I? Questions may arise from local authorities, so be prepared to think quickly on your feet. As always, no one is to carry anything that could identify them. No wallets, no ID, no pictures, no letters. Just cash and a business flyer from our lawyers, Murdoch Law Offices. "Wait, does that mean I, like you three, now work for SDL?" said Odie, slightly shocked. It was then that Odie picked up the SDL lawyer's business flyer and began drafting a contract on it. If he was going to be employed by SDL, a legitimate, registered operating security and logistics company, he wanted it in writing, but more importantly, suited to his favor, as his papa advised him to. As Lilith spoke, she selected and gathered 4 helmets of the same type. She began handing them out, convinced they would not only protect everyone's skulls but also shield them from the hypnotic melodies of the magic flute. Without saying a word, Dr. Hudson gestured at Lilith to retrieve something else from the back of the van. It was as if she already knew without being asked. Dr. Hudson drew everyone's attention by standing, facing all 3 passengers, raising his hands like a concert maestro, and grunting. Everyone, except for Lilith, stopped admiring the high-tech helmets and turned their attention over to Dr. Hudson. Thanks to my genius idea regarding animals' built-in doom detection, and my very own skills as a master in disguise, I anticipated in advance a few disguises for all of us to wear. You all will be wearing animal control uniforms. Disguises that L will distribute accordingly. But first, a bit of context. Dr. Hudson was a respected surgeon until the unfortunate fiery accident he had long ago put in question his mental state and his very own identity. The accident seemed to have affected his brain, and in doing so, changed him, his character, and his personality. He was a different man, whose brilliant mind retained only a small remnant of his past customs and personality traits. With his medical competence in question, and with seemingly little to no other resources of income, he began to give criminals new faces in successful facial reconstructive surgeries. These illegal surgeries drew the attention of the criminal underworld. He not only gave criminals new faces and the means to escape justice, his surgical skills were so well received that Lilith heard of him and had to recruit him into her small army. He became somewhat of a mad scientist, like Dr. Frankenstein. The accident had caused him to discard his old identity, which now eluded him. And now back to our story. Lilith, or L, would have the rank of captain, and wear more professional attire than everyone else, with a blue jacket, black tie, and dress shoes. She would be dressed to impress in professional attire. She would be more likely to be questioned by authority figures. She'd handle all inquiries as team leader. Strong Woman was to use the rank of lieutenant, however. Odie, the newest member, would be Rankles. Both Strong Woman and Odie would also wear blue, and carry protective vests and utility belts, equipped with guns, handcuffs, pepper spray, tasers, and keys to the van. Inscribed upon their uniform in big, huge yellow letters were the words Animal Control. All uniforms had Velcro patches with the city of Fullerton, badges and fake name tags, everything to make it look as authentic as the real thing. "Where's your disguise, Doc?" said Lilith, having realized there was no fourth Animal Control uniform. If there'd been a fourth Animal Control uniform for Doc, it would have fitted his personality. It would reflect his genius and cleverness, yet be inconspicuous. It would not draw attention to him, but hide his features, covering him from head to toe. He'd try to blend in with his surroundings like a chameleon. Ah, that is correct. In my effort to plan and stay prepared, I made an entirely different uniform for myself. Before leaving the hospital, I quickly slipped into another disguise and walked away unnoticed. A disguise I'm more familiar with and comfortable in. It's the disguise I will wear to the mission. Allow me to show you. It was then that Dr. Hudson took off his giant coat, letting it fall to the floor, revealing an exterminator's uniform that read Pest Control and Wildlife Removal in huge, bold letters. It was a dull gray color overall, a jumpsuit with gloves. It displayed a dove, a rat, and a spider, along with the universal no symbol, a circle with a backslash. He donned a gas mask and a helmet. Since meeting Dr. Hudson, Odie had noticed that Doc appeared to have breathing problems and would take large, heavy breaths. Knowing now that Dr. Hudson had been a burned victim, he theorized that Doc may have suffered internal inhalation and lung damage. It likely served well as a breathing apparatus, distributing a constant supply of clean air. But who knows, nothing was what it seemed in this peculiar group. Okay, everyone. You all have 3 minutes to change into your disguises. The helmets will enable communication among users and display a mini-map on the visor, indicating everyone's proximity to the magic flute's sound vibrations, be it unable to be heard by the human ear or large enough to damage the human eardrum. The helmets should protect you and inscribe all noises detected, along with your distance from one another. Everyone began to put on their disguises. Dr. Hudson, having placed on his helmet, was ready. Having had previous experience out in the field conducting covert missions alongside Lilith and Strong Woman, Dr. Hudson thought he'd get to know Odie. "Care for a piece of gum?" asked Doc, extending his right hand and holding a single piece of double bubble gum between his index finger and thumb, still in its original wrapper. "Ah, yes, thank you. You don't know how these things help me relax. I find they help distract me from the nerves and jitters. They loosen me up. It's therapeutic in a sense, I don't know why." "Yeah, I figured. It's a remedy I've heard a few soldiers use right before going out on a mission. In the past, I've worked with soldiers as a surgeon, providing medical aid and performing life-saving procedures. Elle would say that I'm a good man to have around when life and death hang in the balance. I don't feel like talking about the very thin line between life and death, Doc. I hope you don't mind my slightly unpleasant attitude. It's just that I'm overwhelmed with the current misfortunes that have led me here. Not to mention the implications if things go wrong." "Thanks for the gum, Doc. Sorry, this all must be a bit overwhelming for you. After all, you were sort of thrown to the wolves. You haven't been a lawman or civil servant in years. You're likely way out of practice. Not to mention, taking the law into your own hands isn't in line with your long-held values or morals. Let's face it, you're not working with or even within the law. But this is a unique situation. Very peculiar." As they spoke, the team was more than halfway ready. They'd moved as quickly as possible, doing their best to look the part. After all, to pull this off, they'd need to look the part, act the part, and not be caught. As if they worked from behind the scenes and never really left a lasting impression on anyone. Always assimilating, be it as authority figures, residents, homeless bums, or in this case, simple city employees. Odie had begun to question Doc's comments. He felt increasingly as if he were being interrogated, or worse, studied. "What's with all the questions? Are you trying to get in my head? Maybe find a chink in my armor? I hate to say this, but you're starting to get under my skin, Doc. The more I talk to you, the more I feel you're trying to get intel out of me. What? No, not at all. I just wanted to check in and see how you're doing. I think you're holding it together rather well. I'm impressed. Having read your file, I guess I shouldn't be. Unfortunately, you seem to have been placed in many difficult situations and have had to adapt. Let me help. I know how bulky and uncomfortable a helmet can be if it's not adjusted properly. It can't be too tight because then it'll be too uncomfortable, but it can't be too loose, then it'll move profusely, possibly inhibit your vision. As Doc adjusted the straps on Odie's helmet, Odie used his peripheral vision to try to get a look at both Lilith and Strong Woman. Both women were practically ready, adjusting their belts and organizing their utility belts and gadgets as they preferred. As he looked at both women, seemingly ready for battle, he couldn't help but wonder if they were thrilled by the action. He hoped they weren't looking for a lifetime member to join their cause. If they were, Odie wasn't sure he could deliver. He felt too old and beat up for this. He wasn't at his best physically. He'd been chewed up and spat out by Uncle Sam. His back hurt, his muscles ached, and his right knee felt weak and made a crackling noise. He wasn't the same man he'd been in the army or in law enforcement. Stepping back into the field, he would have liked plenty of preparation time to plan things out.